The mysterious disappearance of Maria Carlson in October 2011 raised numerous questions for everyone. It seemed that she had simply vanished into thin air, though in reality she was very close by but deep underground. When a couple married face infertility, their desire to have their own child becomes even stronger. Sometimes it turns into an obsession. The husband and wife are willingly to go to great lengths to fill their family home with the child's laughter. One solution to this problem is surrogacy. However, this way out of the situation does not always unfold as the prospective parents planned. Sometimes during the 9 months of pregnancy, the surrogate mother became so attached to the baby that she can no longer part with it. That's why all agreements became meaningless. In today's story, we will discover what childless parents were prepared to do to have their own little one. Maria Jane Carlson was born on October 7, 1974, in the Philippines. To a single mother, Nina Akasan, Marie spent her childhood alongside her mom. The girl never knew her father and had no idea where he was. When Marie grew older, Nina decided to send her to America so her daughter would have a chance at getting a good education. A friend of Nina's, an American serviceman, took guardianship of the teenager, bringing Marie to the United States and raising her with his other children. The girl lived in a family where she had 6 more brothers and sisters. Marie almost immediately developed a mutual affection and close bond with Asta, one of her guardian's daughters. Deep down, the peeps always considered themselves sisters. Sometimes a friend can become closer than a blood sister, but this was not the case with Marie, because she and Asta actually turned out to be half sisters. After the girl had lived with her family for some time, her guardian revealed that she was actually Marie's biological father for some unknown reason. He had kept this from her for several years. However, this news now made Marie the happiest person on earth. The wonderful discovery that she and Asta were real sisters brought them even closer together. When Marie turned 18, she had a serious falling out with her stepmother and left home. As a result, she was taken in by a woman named Alice Barber, who essentially became her second mother. The woman had enough emotional strength and love to help Marie overcome certain mental health challenges. As she grew older, the young woman and her sister moved into an apartment located above a karaoke bar. This was not by chance. Marie loved singing karaoke bar. She and Asta were regulars at this establishment and often spent entire nights performing songs. This became their favorite memory of their youth. Asta said that her sister was naturally magnetic and people were drawn to her. Marie was not just full of life, she was life itself. This young woman always noticed beauty in other people, and to lift the spirits of those around her, she was not shy about giving out compliments left and right. Marie adored the color pink and had loads of clothing in pink shades, which further emphasized her pure energy and charm. One of the people captivated by Marie's magnetic attraction was Jeff Carlson. He showed signs of interest and managed to attract that 20-year-old girl with his serious intentions. Very soon, Marie and Jeff fell in love and got married. They had a wonderful daughter whom they named Paris. Marie studied at college to earn a degree in criminal justice. After completing in her studies, she got a job at the police department and quickly climbed the career ladder. Become a deputy sheriff in Colorado, Carlson dreamed of becoming an FBI agent in the future. However, not everything in the young woman's life was as smooth as it seemed at first glance. Marie struggled with mental health issues throughout her life. This interfered not only with her career building but also with relationships. Eventually, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. On one hand, she got answers to her questions. Everything started to make sense. On the other hand, Marie had to learn to live with this, somehow adapt, study the illness, and reduce triggering factors. Maintaining stability during this period was not easy, and no matter how hard Marie tried, her mental health fluttered and affected those around her. It was because of her illness that the young woman lost her police job, and ultimately, this led to the dissolution of her marriage with Jeff. The spouses parted on a positive note, and the man continued to support his former wife. They simply came to a mutual decision that they were not right for each other. But for their daughter's sake, they needed to maintain a good relationship. There was no bitterness between Jeff and Marie. They understood that each would now have their own life, but their shared daughter would forever remain the connecting link between them. For some time, Paris was under Marie's custody. But then, the woman realized that Jeff could provide their daughter with the stability the child needed. Marie made one of the most difficult decisions in her life. She had to think everything through seriously and choose not what she wanted, but what was the best for her daughter. Jeff was an excellent father, and Marie's mental health issues could sooner or later affect Paris. And the woman dreamed that her girl would grow up in a stable environment. Unfortunately, she herself could not provide this for her daughter. Marie had a habit of living somewhere for several days without telling anyone. Nevertheless, this did not mean that Marie disappeared from Paris' life. Mother and daughter stayed in constant contact, talked on the phone every day, and Marie visited the girl as often as she could. At the same time, she did everything possible to improve her mental state. Doctors advised the woman to change her environment, and Marie moved to Fort Walton Beach in Florida on the Emerald Coast. The beautiful area and sea area helped restore her emotional strength, so the move there proved very beneficial for her mental health. Marie got a job at a coffee shop located near the local church. Thanks to this, the woman began directly participating in church life and met the people who ran it. The Calvary Church on the Emerald Coast was led by local pastor James Flinders, a charismatic guy with a big heart, known for his rare but inspiring sermons. The parishioners loved him, and to attract more people to the church, James began publishing videos of his sermons on YouTube. He had long dreamed of creating a large community and was happy to share his thoughts with future congregation members. James was not the only person with a big heart. His wife Tanya led the female congregation and had a reputation as a woman who benefited her community through good deeds. Therefore, when Marie began participating in church life, the Flinders couple showed her unprecedented generosity. Knowing that Marie had recently moved, they helped pay some of her bills. That is how it all began. In October 2009, Marie essentially moved into their Fort Walton Beach home, becoming part of the Flinders family. This was in essence the third family to take her in the United States. The first people to take custody of little Marie was her biological father's American family. The second was a woman named Alice Barber, whom everyone called Kay. She cared for Marie when she turned 18. Eventually, Kay became an extremely important person in Marie's life. The girl believed this was how a mother should be. And now, Marie called Kay and told her she had found spiritual refuge in the church and befriended the local pastor. A bit later, Alice Barber would play a significant role in this story and help police investigate her ward's disappearance. So Marie moved into Pastor James and his wife Tanya's home, and rather complicated and contradictory relationships developed between the three of them. In 2010, the young woman went to Arizona and lived with James' family for some time. Then she returned to Fort Walton Beach, and it turned out that Marie was pregnant. The church congregation was told that in Arizona, Marie had been dating a man who turned out to be very rough and cruel. Upon learning she was expecting a child, she broke things off with him and returned to Florida. According to this version, Marie wanted to terminate the pregnancy, but James and Tanya, being kind people, intervened and agreed to adopt the child. However, the Flanders' close friends and relatives heard quite a different story, which they swore to keep secret. In reality, Marie was acting as a surrogate mother. James and Tanya had long struggled with infertility. The woman would get pregnant but could never carry a baby to term. She had already experienced several miscarriages. Because of this, they could not have children, but desperately dreamed of a baby. Marie was so kind as to agree to help them in this situation. In private circles, Tanya assured that Marie became pregnant through artificial insemination. But since IVF is quite an expensive procedure, they decided to save money and did everything the old-fashioned way to facilitate conception. Tanya said she was quite comfortable with this arrangement. The couple agreed with Marie that after the baby's birth, she would stay with them for the first 3 months to feed the infant. But after this period, the surrogate mother was to leave the Flanders home forever, and Marie would essentially give them this child for everything they had done for her. However, neither version was entirely accurate. The only thing that proved true was that Marie was indeed pregnant and James was the father. The pastor and his wife simply did not want to advertise their complicated relationship to another parishioners. They knew James would be condemned for having relations with another woman, so they tried to give the story a more decent tone. Whatever the case, everyone got the impression that this was a mutually agreed upon situation where everyone was satisfied. Marie was happy to give the baby to the couple who had welcomed her with open arms and who themselves were unable to have children. And James and Tanya were immensely happy to finally become parents. Everything turned out wonderfully right up until 3 months after the baby's birth. Baby Grace was born in July 2011. As expected, all residents of the Flanders household cared for the girl. James, Tanya, and Marie decided that Grace would be breastfed until 3 months. So by fall, the woman began gradually transitioning the child to formula. Everything was going according to plan. Then suddenly on October 19, 2011, several of Marie's relatives and friends received a rather strange messages from her. Marie wrote that she had left Fort Walton Beach the day before and now was the best time to carry out her long-held plan. She had hidden this from everyone, knowing that her loved ones would try to talk her out of it. At the end of the message, Marie said she loved and valued everyone. The strange message was sent to several recipients, including her ex-husband Jeff, sister Asta, Alice Barber, as well as James, Tanya, and a couple of Marie's friends. And without exception, all of her closest people immediately had a bad feeling about this. The thing is, this was not like Marie at all. She would never leave without seeing her 7-year-old daughter Paris, and would not send a message instead of calling to explain everything, and would have told at least one person about her plans. Some immediately tried calling Marie back, others wrote reply messages, but neither group received any further clarification. Alice Barber, who had become a mother figure to the girl, asked Marie about her 3-month-old daughter Grace, and Marie replied that the child was in good hands with Tanya and James. This was the only response Marie sent, and it indeed confirmed Alice's concerns because in all the years Marie had known the Flanders, when talking about them, she always said James and Tanya, not the other way round. Though from the outside this might have seemed insignificant for Alice, such a switch was an alarming signal. The woman knew Marie well and had heard her said James and Tanya hundreds of times. This phrase was practically imprinted in her head. Alice had an agonizing feeling that someone else had written the message. She contacted the Flinders directly and asked if everything was all right with Marie. Their response did not reassure her, but only added to her worries. Tanya said that Marie had actually left their home 2 days earlier, and before this, her mental state had been concerning. Sister Asta and her ex-husband, Jeff Carlson, were also troubled by the strange message and Marie's subsequent silence. They began calling other relatives and friends hoping to learn some details, but no one knew anything. Jeff, knowing how devoted his ex-wife was to their 7-year-old daughter Paris, concluded that Marie must be in trouble. The man decided to report her missing to the police, but this happened almost a week after Marie's disappearance on October 24th. Although Marie was a grown 37-year-old woman and had the right to go whatever she wanted, the police took her ex-husband's report seriously this time. The authorities immediately opened a missing person case. Jeff was honest with the detectives and explained that Marie could have previously gone somewhere for several days, but she always called beforehand and visited her daughter Paris, and especially never ignored calls from loved ones like now, knowing they might call her about something important. The immediate actions taken by the police pleased Marie's relatives, usually as soon as officers heard about someone with a mental illness. They were reluctant to search. One of the investigators was a woman who had also recently had a baby, and she perfectly understood that rarely would any mother leave her newborn daughter and simply leave. This inconsistency became the decisive factor for this detective that Marie Carlson had gotten into some trouble and urgently needed help. Investigating this case became her top priority. First, the detective spoke with Marie Carlson's close ones and friends. Asta told them about her sister's divorce from Jeff, how she lost her job, and how she had to live with James and Tanya in Florida. The investigators also learned about Marie's interesting relationship with the Flanders. Asta knew little about pregnancy and childbirth because Marie hardly talked about this topic, and her sister did not want to ask questions and interfere in matters that were not her business. The woman hoped that Marie could tell her about it herself. When she was ready at that time, the investigators still did not know who the child's father was, and they wanted to figure this out first. In the earliest stage of the search, the detectives decided to pay a visit to the Flanders. The couple were the last to see Marie and could know more than others. At least they were able to clarify certain points. On October 27, James made this only statement to authorities. He told about how Marie entered their lives and gave an explanation about her pregnancy. According to James, discussions between the three of them led to Marie agreeing to become a surrogate mother. Due to lack of funds for IVF, they decided that James would simply sleep with Marie, and Tanya did not object. She had dreamed of having their own baby for so long that she agreed to everything. While Marie was living with his family in Arizona, the couple visited her. That is where it all happened. The man claimed this was the only time he essentially cheated on his wife, and that was for a noble cause. Marie got pregnant on the first try. As soon as this was confirmed, the Flanders brought her back to their home in Florida. Tanya was very worried that Marie might suddenly change her mind and decide to terminate the pregnancy. James and his wife know about the bipolar disorder and saw that Marie's mood could change at any moment. That's exactly why they wanted to be near her and their future child. Marie sometimes got nervous, but overall the pregnancy progressed normally. The couple cared for her and tried to anticipate any wishes to keep her mental state stable. In summer, when baby Grace was born, they threw a party at the Flanders house. James showed photos from the celebration where everyone, including Marie, was smiling and happy. But then, everything changed. The couple began noticing how, after the child's birth, Marie's behavior started to change. Due to the pregnancy, the woman had stopped taking her prescribed medications and now fell into a depressive state. It seemed to the officers that James was hinting that Marie might harm herself or at least for planning to do so. He was so concerned that he worried about her well-being, and ultimately on October 17, he stayed home and did not go to work to monitor Marie's condition. James also mentioned that this was the last time he and his wife saw the woman who had given them baby Grace. And a couple of days later, on October 19, Marie's close ones, friends and family received a strange text message from her. That morning, Marie woke up in a bad mood. For some reason, the man worried she might leave and try to take the baby with her. Something was clearly wrong with her. Later that day, Marie said she was tired and went to her room to take a nap. At this time, Tanya went shopping with the baby, and James first waited for the woman to wake up, after which, around 6 in the evening, he went for a run. When he returned home, Marie was already gone. However, in the room, he and Tanya found a packed bag with belongings which, for some reason, the woman had not taken with her. On the 19th, 2 days later, the couple received a strange message from Marie, which was sent to several other people besides them. The Flanders waited a couple of days hoping the woman would return, and then decided to go look for her themselves. And although they did not find Marie, they did find her car. The Mazda was parked in a paid lot at the nearest airport. James did not want Marie to overpay for extended parking and drove the vehicle to this house. It never occurred to the pastor to report the woman missing. After this, James gave the detectives the receipt from the paid parking lot, which confirmed that she had indeed picked up the white Mazda on October 21st, 2011. From the airport parking lot, moreover, police received information that Marie's car had been left there on the 18th. This was strange considering she was last seen on the 17th. So where was she after leaving the pastor's house? The authorities were skeptical about Marie's sudden departure because her belongings were still at home and there was no activity on her bank accounts. Police checked passengers' lists for flights, and Marie Carlson's name was not there. There were also no records of her purchasing a ticket. This meant one of two things: either the woman herself left the car in the parking lot to throw people off a track, or someone else did it for the same reason. Naturally, the police's next step was to check the surveillance cameras in the parking lot. Detectives wanted to know who was driving the Mazda, but as usually happens in such situations, the cameras were not working that day. In the end, experts tried to lift a fingerprint from the button that must be pressed to get a parking ticket, but unfortunately this did not work, and detectives were back at the beginning of their investigation. Friends, over 90% of viewers watch videos without subscribing to the channel. Check if you are subscribed. If not, please be so kind as to subscribe to the channel to support me. Questions about where Marie was, how her car ended up in the parking lot, and whether she was alright still remained unanswered. Investigators began questioning other church members, hoping to get an idea of what might have happened, but only learned various versions about Marie's pregnancy and relationships between her, Tanya and James, ranging from the abusive boyfriend in Arizona to the plan. Surrogacy situation. The investigators only became more confused, so they tried to talk to the Flanders again to clarify some things. This time they spoke with Tanya, and the woman confirmed what James had said earlier but added some details before going to bed. James and Marie had a few drinks. Tanya was in the room with them during the sexual act. It turned out that Marie was not just a surrogate mother. She was in polygamous relationship with the Flanders couple. It seemed this information was kept secret from everyone, as such behavior did not align with what the pastor and his wife preach in church. According to Tanya, Marie was happy to help them have a child and full followed their agreement, but when baby Grace was born, everything changed. Marie became withdrawn and wanted the daughter for herself. By the way, a woman from the church told detectives about this. Once she heard Marie declare that she wanted Grace and James to belong to her alone, and another parishioners mentioned something very strange and frightening. Once Tanya said that James would never be able to take Marie's life, but she herself would have the courage to do it. At that moment, the police attention completely shifted to the Flanders couple. They definitely had a motive to get rid of the child's surrogate mother, whom they considered their own. However, suspicion alone was not enough in this investigation. They needed more substantial evidence, for example, a body. Through 2 months of unsuccessful searching for the missing Marie Carlson, the investigating accumulated a lot of information regarding the mobile phone record of Marie, James, and Tanya. Detective discovered that whatever Marie's phone was in the days after her disappearance, James' phone was pinned by the same cell towers. This meant their phones were close together despite James saying he last saw Marie on the 17th. On October 18, when Marie's car was driving to the airport parking lot, James' phone responded to the airport's cell tower just minutes afterward, and on October 19, both their mobiles disconnected from the same cell tower near the Flanders house when Marie allegedly sent the message to all her close friends and family. James' entire story started to look implausible. Then another detail emerged. Detectives came across a highway patrol inquiry when they were checking the license plate of a white Mazda abandoned at a gas station on October 17th. The patrol officer looked up the plates and saw the car was registered to Marie Carlson. At that time, the woman had not yet been reported missing, so the officer who noticed the car did not take any action. But now that Marie was missing, this became an important lead because James' phone was pinned near the same gas station. Once detectives learned about this, they hypothesized that James might have taken Marie Carlson's life, then tried to dispose of her car. Leaving it at the gas station, he apparently hoped the vehicle would be stolen, but since this did not happen, the next day he moved into airport's paid parking lot to create the impression that the woman had left her own accord. All these suspicions were based on mobile phone records. The data confirmed that Tanya Flanders was indeed shopping with her newborn daughter on the 17th and was not near Marie and James. So it was unlikely the spouses acted together. Despite how incriminating the information seemed, this definitely was not enough to accuse someone of a serious crime. Therefore, detective decided to talk to James again regarding the new facts. They called the pastor and arranged a meeting with him. However, there was no one to talk to as on January 28, 2012. James, Tanya, and baby Grace hurriedly packed their belongings and left for Arizona in the middle of the night. This happened immediately after the investigators' call. The sudden relocation aroused even more suspicions. Additionally, another church pastor named Jason Anderson informed investigators that prior to departure, James had spoken about his intention to leave the country. The abrupt desire to hide from law enforcement was an alarming signal, but even more shocking to the detectives was the information that James had hinted at voluntary departure from life because of this. He was even placed in a psychiatric hospital for 10 days all. This happened several days after police officers knocked on the Flanders door and inquired about Marie. Pastor Jason Anderson also revealed that before their departure, James and Tanya held a meeting at the church where they admitted to being in a polygamous relationship with Marie Carlson, and this woman meant more to them than just a surrogate mother. However, before Marie disappeared, she and James had a severe argument. He even had several scratches from her nails, but the Flanders were certain that Marie was alive. After such a candid confession, the man stepped down from his position as pastor and a few days later left Fort Walton Beach with his wife and daughter, fortunately before this. Alice Barber, Marie's substitute mother, managed to approach the couple with a request to collect Carlson's belongings, among which was the laptop. The woman immediately handed it over to law enforcement. The device was sent to the forensic laboratory, but no information was found on it. Everything had been erased. The suspects in Marie Carlson's disappearance had left. Her body was not found. All evidence proved useless. The case reached a temporary deadlock. However, not all hope was lost, because in April 2012, anonymous information was received by the phone. A person who wished to remain unnamed reported that Marie was no longer alive and James Flanders was responsible, having buried her body in the backyard of his house. This information gave detectives reason to conduct a thorough search of the area behind the former pastor's home. Dogs and ground penetrating radar were utilized, but despite hours of searching, nothing was discovered. The newly emerged hope in the hearts of Marie's relatives was once again shattered. The case stalled again for some time. A whole year passed before James Flanders answered the detectives' calls. The conversation lasted about 2 hours. The man complained that he had become a victim. He was going to be accused of something he had not done. The pastor's mental health sharply degenerated after the situation with Marie's disappearance. To the detectives' direct question about who took Marie's life, James answered that he had nothing to do with it. Unfortunately, without a body and confession, police could do little, but they did not give up and took a wait-and-see position. 3 years later, forensic technologies had significantly improved. Marie's laptop was sent for a repeated examination and specialists managed to recover deleted information from the computer. It turned out that Marie and James' relationship was far more intimate and they were not limited to a single sexual encounter. The man and woman exchanged rather private messages. There were more than 100 of them, and they all ceased on October 17. The day Marie vanished, also on that day, all activity on her credit card and bank account completely stopped. An indirect piece of evidence was also James' sermon uploaded by him to YouTube. It was published approximately a month before Marie's disappearance. The pastor spoke bizarre things. He talked about wanting to strangle to death anyone who would stab him in the back. James seemed to warn that if someone were to gossip about him trying to break him or hurt his feeling, he would commit a sin and send the liar to the afterlife. The pastor's words sounded menacing. Such utterances were hardly accepted within church walls. Technically, this video was not yet proof of a planned crime, but it again cast a shadow on James Flanders, and the detectives considered that there were enough circumstantial pieces of evidence in this case to ask a judge to issue an arrest warrant for the pastor. On May 15, 2015, James was arrested and charged with second-degree homicide. If the prosecution had rushed and submitted the case materials to court, the defense attorneys would have easily torn all the evidence to shreds and James would have been acquitted. And this would have been unfair not only to Marie, but also to her loved ones. Fortunately, the prosecution team acted wisely. The prosecutor offered James a plea deal in exchange for revealing the location of missing Marie's body and the story of what happened to her. The deal promised the pastor a more lenient sentence. This was not exactly what Marie and her family deserved, but at least they would finally be able to properly lay her remains to rest and get some closure. In April 2016, James agreed to the deal and pleaded guilty to manslaughter. which carried a maximum sentence of only 15 years. James told investigators that lately Marie had been unhappy with how the couple was raising her daughter. They began having constant arguments about this. Moreover, the woman had stopped taking the pills prescribed by her doctor. Because of this, her mental state was very unstable. She would become agitated over any issue and turn aggressive. On October 17, Marie literally attacked him because he had complained about her depressive state and mentioned hospitalization. Marie became enraged and began to assault him. In an attempt to stop Marie, James embraced her in a tight bear hug and they both fell to the ground. When he realized the woman was no longer resisting, he released his grip. Marie was not moving or breathing. She was dead. Instead of calling 911 as any rational person would have done, especially if it was not premeditated, James wrapped her body in a blanket and buried it in his backyard. He dug such a deep hole that neither ground-penetrating radar nor search doors could detect the body. When searching the area and in 2013, the couple filed a petition to terminate Marie Carlson's parental rights to Grace. If detectives had thoroughly examined the house's backyard, they could have found missing Marie's body within 6 months after her disappearance. And then James would have received a full sentence for concealing the body and taking Marie's life because of this. The detectives working on the case experienced feelings of guilt and frustration. In any case, the possibility of bringing Marie home was very important to her family, and they were glad they could finally lay her to rest in peace. The forensic team, guided by James, excavated the hole in the backyard and retrieved the deceased woman's remains to return to her relatives. At this moment, James fell to his knees and began crying over the spot where he had buried Marie. This was so theatrical, foolish, and simply offensive to everyone present to live peacefully knowing you had taken someone's life, and then to put on an act pretending to be distressed over your victim's death. In July 2016, James was sentenced to 15 years in prison. James was around 47 at the time in court. He claimed he never thought he could fall so low. To this day, he is still serving his sentence. His release is scheduled for 2029. As for Tanya Flander, no evidence was found that she was somehow involved in the killing of Marie Carlson. Did she know what her husband had done? She surely knew and remained silent, wanting to preserve the family, although Tanya herself never mentioned this. The woman still raises Marie's child daughter Grace. James' family helps her with this. Marie's sister Asta very much wanted to gain custody of her niece and filed a petition, but the girl remains with Tanya.